Imagine living in a small town where everyone knows everyone's secrets. A tightly knit community of just 200 people. Rumors spread like wildfire, and once your name is circulated, it's almost impossible to clear it. Now, envision yourself as a young girl, barely 13 or 14, suddenly caught in the middle of a scandal so shocking, so unprecedented, that it would leave your entire town in uproar. This was the reality for Mary. She wasn't merely a girl from Nazareth. She was destined to become the mother of Jesus, a role that would place her at the center of one of the greatest stories ever told, but not without unimaginable challenges. When Mary became pregnant, the whispers began immediately. How could this happen? Who's the father? In a society where reputation was everything, where women accused of immorality could face public disgrace or even death, Mary's pregnancy was not just controversial, it was dangerous. The scandal didn't stop with her. It extended to Joseph, a man caught between love and duty, honor and compassion. Imagine his heartbreak as he grappled with the decision to protect Mary or to walk away. Here's the twist. This wasn't just a personal ordeal for Mary and Joseph. The gossip didn't fade away. It followed their son Jesus for years. It created doubt, cast shadows over his teachings, and influenced how people perceived him. Even as he performed miracles, there were always murmurs in the background, whispers of a scandal that had begun even before he was born. What can we learn from this? The story of Mary, Joseph, and Jesus is a tale of resilience, grace, and the power to rise above judgment. Today, we're peeling back the layers to uncover the hidden battles behind Mary's pregnancy, Joseph's courage, and how a single cruel rumor could have thwarted the message of hope before it even started. If you're curious to know more, stay with us. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Let's delve into how a cruel piece of gossip about Mary almost derailed Jesus' mission and what it can teach us today. Nazareth wasn't a bustling city or a thriving trade hub. It was a tiny village of 200 to 300 residents tucked away in Galilee. Life here was simple, with close-knit families and communal traditions. However, this closeness had its drawbacks. Everyone knew everyone else's business. News, or more often, gossip, spread like wildfire. When Mary, a young girl just past her early teenage years, was found to be pregnant, the whispers started almost immediately. The shock, disbelief, and speculation were deafening. To truly grasp the gravity of Mary's situation, one must understand the cultural backdrop. In Mary's era, there was no concept of adolescence. A girl became a woman as soon as she reached puberty, often marrying shortly thereafter. Mary, likely around 13 or 14, was already betrothed to Joseph, a carpenter and widower with children from a previous marriage. Betrothal was not a casual engagement. It was a binding agreement that marked the beginning of marriage, even though the couple didn't live together or consummate the union until later. It was during this sacred in-between phase that Mary's pregnancy became known. Imagine the scandal this would have caused. Nazareth, a town where everyone's lives were intertwined, was not a place to keep secrets. Questions swirled. Was Mary unfaithful? Who was the father? As rumors grew wilder, one particularly damaging accusation emerged. Years later, critics like Celsus, a Roman lawyer, claimed that Mary had been seduced by a Roman soldier named Pantera. These whispers, though unfounded, would stain Mary's name and even affect how some people viewed Jesus during his ministry. The consequences of such accusations were more than social. They were potentially deadly. Under Jewish law, adultery was punishable by stoning, though Roman authorities often discouraged such executions. Still, the threat of public disgrace and lifelong rejection was very real. For Mary, every sideways glance, every hushed conversation in the marketplace must have felt like a silent judgment. She was caught in a whirlwind of suspicion and shame. Joseph, too, felt the pressure. What could he do? As a man of honor, his reputation was on the line. Could he marry Mary, knowing what people thought? Could he claim her child as his own without inviting scandal? The whispers weren't just about Mary. They implicated him as well. His status in the community, his dignity as a man, and his spiritual integrity were all at stake. Nazareth's tightly woven social fabric made the scandal a communal affair. Families likely debated the situation over evening meals. Neighbors exchanged rumors at the well, and elders may have quietly questioned Joseph's role. Yet, amid the chaos, Mary clung to the angel's words. "Do not be afraid, Mary, for you have found favor with God." Her faith must have been her anchor, but faith doesn't erase the pain of judgment or the fear of what lies ahead. Seeking solace, Mary fled to the home of her cousin Elizabeth, who herself was experiencing a miraculous pregnancy. Unlike the judgmental streets of Nazareth, Elizabeth's home was a sanctuary. Here, Mary was celebrated, embraced, and understood. Yet even as Elizabeth's joyous greeting rang in her ears, Mary must have wondered what awaited her back in Nazareth. She knew her trials were far from over. This wasn't just about Mary's personal struggle. Her pregnancy and the scandal it sparked would leave an indelible mark on her family, her future, and even her son. And in the middle of it all was Joseph, faced with an impossible choice. For Joseph, the discovery of Mary's pregnancy was a crushing blow. As a righteous man deeply committed to his faith, Joseph would have felt the weight of both his love for Mary and his obligations under Jewish law. How could he reconcile the two? The woman he was set to marry was carrying a child that wasn't his. The community's whispers about Mary weren't just an attack on her. They cast a shadow on Joseph's integrity as well. In Jewish tradition, betrothal was legally binding. Breaking it required a formal divorce, and in cases of suspected adultery, a man had the right to publicly accuse his betrothed. This would have exposed Mary to severe punishment, possibly even death by stoning, although such executions were rare under Roman rule. Still, the stigma of an accusation would have been devastating enough. But Joseph chose a different path. Instead of seeking vengeance or vindication, he decided to divorce Mary quietly, sparing her public humiliation. This decision tells us a great deal about Joseph's character. He was a man of compassion, someone willing to bear his own pain silently rather than add to Mary's suffering. Yet even this private resolution would have come at a cost. Joseph's silence could have been interpreted as guilt, an admission that he was either complicit in Mary's supposed indiscretion or too weak to enforce his rights as a husband. By sparing Mary, Joseph risked his own reputation. But Joseph's plans were about to take a dramatic turn. One night, as he wrestled with his decision, he had a dream. In it, an angel appeared, saying, "Joseph, son of David, do not be afraid to take Mary home as your wife, because what is conceived in her is from the Holy Spirit. She will give birth to a son, and you are to give him the name Jesus, because he will save his people from their sins." Imagine the relief and confusion Joseph must have felt upon waking. On one hand, the angel's message confirmed Mary's innocence and reassured Joseph of her faithfulness. On the other, it presented a staggering responsibility. Joseph wasn't just being asked to marry Mary. He was being entrusted with the care of the Messiah, the one who would save all of Israel. The stakes couldn't have been higher. Joseph's choice to obey the angel's command marked a turning point, not just in his life, but in the unfolding of God's plan. By standing by Mary, he shielded her from societal judgment and provided Jesus with the protection and legitimacy of a father. Yet this wasn't a simple act of compliance. It was a bold leap of faith. Joseph's decision to marry Mary didn't erase the gossip or skepticism surrounding her pregnancy. If anything, it might have amplified it. To the people of Nazareth, Joseph's choice could have looked like an admission of guilt or a desperate attempt to cover up a scandal. Still, Joseph accepted the task with humility and determination. In doing so, he demonstrated a profound trust in God, one that outweighed his fears of public opinion. He chose love over law, grace over judgment, a decision that foreshadowed the very values Jesus would later preach during his ministry. Joseph's story is often overshadowed by Mary's, but his role in protecting and supporting her cannot be underestimated. Without his courage, Mary might not have survived the harsh judgment of her community. And without Joseph's acceptance, Jesus' lineage as a descendant of King David, a vital piece of his identity as the Messiah, might have been called into question. This quiet yet monumental act of faith is a reminder that sometimes doing what is right doesn't mean doing what is easy. Joseph's journey was far from over, but his choice to embrace Mary and her unborn child set the stage for the greatest story ever told. One of the most powerful stories from Jesus' ministry is the account of the adulterous woman in John 8:111. It's a moment filled with tension, judgment, and profound mercy. A group of men, armed with stones, drags a woman caught in adultery before Jesus, demanding a verdict. According to the law, they insist she deserves death. Instead of delivering judgment, Jesus kneels and begins writing in the sand. When pressed, he simply says, "Let anyone among you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her." The men slowly retreat, one by one, until none remain. Then Jesus turns to the woman and says, "Neither do I condemn you. Go and sin no more." It's a story of grace triumphing over condemnation, and it resonates deeply when viewed alongside the gossip surrounding Mary and Joseph. The parallels are striking. Like the adulterous woman, Mary faced the threat of public judgment, and her story was weaponized by those eager to cast stones, though in her case, metaphorical ones. Joseph's choice to protect Mary echoes Jesus' defense of the woman. Both stories highlight a refusal to let cultural norms or the opinions of others dictate justice, and both reveal a deeper truth. Mercy and compassion have the power to break the cycle of judgment. It's also possible that Jesus' response in this moment was shaped by the gossip surrounding his own birth. He would have been acutely aware of the pain caused by unfounded accusations. His mother's story may have given him a unique sensitivity to the plight of the adulterous woman. He saw beyond her alleged sin to her humanity, a woman in need of compassion, not condemnation. But there's more to this story. By challenging the crowd to reflect on their own flaws, Jesus shifted the focus from the woman's guilt to their hypocrisy. The same could be said of Mary's story. Those who whispered about her were likely blind to their own imperfections, eager to judge without understanding. Jesus' actions in this scene also set a powerful precedent for how his followers are called to treat others. It's easy to cast stones, to judge based on appearances or incomplete stories. But Jesus' example teaches us to look inward first, to recognize our own need for grace before condemning others. This lesson is as relevant today as it was in the first century. In a world where gossip and judgment often overshadow empathy, this story calls us back to love, forgiveness, and understanding. For Mary, Joseph, and the adulterous woman, the judgment of others loomed like a heavy shadow, threatening to define their lives and strip them of their dignity. Their stories were marked by moments of fear and uncertainty, where societal condemnation could have crushed their spirits. Yet, through extraordinary acts of mercy, Joseph's quiet protection, Jesus' defense of the woman, and his ultimate sacrifice on the cross, those narratives were rewritten into stories of redemption, hope, and grace. This parallel isn't just a theological insight or a historical observation. It's an invitation to each of us. How often do we act like the crowd, quick to cast stones and slow to extend mercy? And how often do we follow Jesus' example, choosing compassion over judgment? The decisions we make in those moments of choice can transform lives, just as they did for the adulterous woman. Joseph's decision to stand by Mary was not a simple one. It was a decision marked by anguish, doubt, and the weight of a culture that demanded conformity. In his heart, he must have wrestled with what seemed like a betrayal by the woman he loved. And yet, divine intervention changed everything. When the angel appeared to Joseph in a dream, the message was as clear as it was transformative. "Joseph, son of David, do not be afraid to take Mary home as your wife, because what is conceived in her is from the Holy Spirit. She will give birth to a son, and you are to give him the name Jesus, because he will save his people from their sins." This reassurance wasn't just about Mary's innocence. It was a direct call to action, a divine mandate that placed Joseph in a pivotal role within God's plan for humanity. This moment provided clarity in a time of overwhelming uncertainty. It validated Mary's story, gave Joseph the courage to defy societal expectations, and set him on a path of obedience that would shape the destiny of his family and, ultimately, the world. For Joseph, the angel's words shattered the barriers of doubt and fear. His decision to take Mary as his wife was an act of profound faith. It was not just an emotional or spiritual choice. It was an act of public defiance against the judgment of his community. By marrying Mary, Joseph shielded her from the harshest consequences of societal condemnation and protected her from becoming an outcast. His willingness to embrace this role also ensured that Jesus would grow up under the legitimacy and lineage of King David, a vital detail in his identity as the Messiah. This act of obedience came with a price. Joseph's decision likely drew suspicion and fueled gossip. To the people of Nazareth, his actions might have appeared foolish, weak, or even complicit in what they believed to be a scandal. Yet Joseph trusted the angel's message and chose to place his faith in God's plan rather than the flawed opinions of men. His quiet strength and unwavering humility became the foundation upon which Mary and Jesus could fulfill their divine purposes. It is remarkable to consider how Joseph's simple act of trust rippled through history. By accepting the angel's command, Joseph not only protected Mary and Jesus, but also preserved the legacy of God's promise to David. Through his quiet faithfulness, Joseph became a living example of the gospel's overarching theme, that God often works through ordinary people and unlikely circumstances to achieve extraordinary outcomes. The angel's message to Joseph also highlights the power of divine reassurance. In moments of fear or doubt, it is tempting to let uncertainty dictate our actions. Joseph's experience reminds us that faith often requires stepping into the unknown, trusting in a plan greater than what we can see. His courage to embrace his divine calling transformed what could have been a story of shame and rejection into one of hope and redemption. As we reflect on Joseph's story, it challenges us to consider our own choices. How often do we allow fear, judgment, or societal pressures to cloud our decisions? And how might our lives change if we, like Joseph, chose to trust in a higher purpose? His example shows us that even the quietest acts of faith can carry profound consequences, shaping not only our own lives, but also the lives of those around us. Joseph's legacy is not one of grand gestures or public acclaim. It is a legacy of quiet faithfulness, steadfast trust, and a willingness to act with love and integrity, even when faced with great difficulty. In this way, his story mirrors the message that Jesus would later share with the world, a message of grace, redemption, and the transformative power of faith. The story of Mary, Joseph, and Jesus is more than an ancient narrative. It is a timeless lesson about the power of grace, the strength of faith, and the courage to trust in a plan greater than ourselves. At its core is a young girl who faced unimaginable judgment and danger with unwavering courage, a man who chose compassion and faith over fear, and a child whose mission would change the course of history. Together, they remind us what it means to rise above gossip, judgment, and societal expectations to fulfill a greater purpose. Joseph's quiet strength and Mary's unshakable faith shine as examples for us all. They teach us that divine plans often defy human logic, and that trusting in God requires stepping into the unknown with courage and conviction. Their willingness to embrace God's purpose, despite the cost, challenges us to reflect on our own lives. How often do we let fear, doubt, or judgment dictate our choices? And how might our lives change if we placed our faith in something greater than ourselves? The parallels between Mary's story and Jesus' ministry are striking. Just as Mary endured suspicion and rejection, Jesus carried the burden of public judgment throughout his life. Yet both responded not with anger or despair, but with love and obedience. In doing so, they demonstrated the redemptive power of faith, transforming stories of potential shame into powerful testimonies of hope. This story also sheds light on the destructive power of gossip and judgment, forces that remain prevalent in our world today. How often do we, like the crowd in the story of the adulterous woman, pick up metaphorical stones to throw at others? And how often do we, like Joseph or Jesus, choose to see beyond the accusations and extend grace instead? The choice is ours, and it holds the potential to transform not only individual lives, but also entire communities. As we reflect on these lessons, let us consider how we can embody the values of trust, compassion, and faith in our own lives. Whether it means standing by someone who has been unfairly judged, choosing forgiveness over condemnation, or trusting in a purpose we don't fully understand, small acts of faith can ripple outward in ways we may never fully grasp. Mary, Joseph, and Jesus invite us to rethink how we respond to challenges, judgment, and uncertainty. Their story is a call to action, to choose love over fear, trust over doubt, and grace over judgment. It is a reminder that even in the face of adversity, God's plan can bring light into the darkest circumstances. What about you? Have you ever experienced a moment where you had to choose faith over fear or forgiveness over judgment? Share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear your story. And if you found this message meaningful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to help spread these timeless lessons to others.